I'm Danielle, and this is,
Derek.
and we own Batch Mead in Temecula, California. Been open since 2019. And we're just going to go over our fun questions that we get asked by homebrewers at the meadery. So, one of the first questions that I always get asked, even though I don't technically brew anything, I make the pretty labels. This guy does all the brewing. So, a lot of people will ask, is it better to do 1 gallon or 5 gallons when you're making either your first batch of mead or doing mead in general?
So I would say 5 gallons is generally better, but you could still do 1 gallon. That's fine. It's just going to be harder to filter and rack your lees off of later. So keep that in mind when you're doing 1 versus 5.
And dividing the ingredients by five, is that how it works, or does that not apply?
That doesn't apply. Yeah, I mean, you're just using less ingredients, but you're also putting in the same amount of effort. So if you're going to make some good mead, why not make 5 gallons versus one? You're still going to wait 2 or 3 months to be able to taste it.
Another question that we get asked is, what's the ideal water to honey ratio for a dry mead and then a sweet mead?
So ideally, it all depends on your yeast strain, but going with the normal white yeast strain, um, you would want to do 3 pounds per gallon would get you a nice dry mead that's around 14% alcohol. You'll want to go a little bit higher, maybe 4 pounds per gallon, if you're going for a higher alcohol, sweeter mead.
And then if you're going to add fruit to your fermentation, here at the meadery we do secondary fermentation. So we don't let our fruit ferment because we like to get all of the alcohol just from the honey. But if you're a home brewer, should they add it in those primary? Should they do a secondary?
Experiment with both. It's fun to see the difference in flavor when you add it to primary versus adding it to secondary. Just keep in mind that when you add it to secondary, there is a chance that you can re-ferment. So don't bottle it right away. Make sure that the fermentation is completely done and doesn't kick off again.
There's different providers online, like Oregon Fruit. You can buy little jars of aseptic fruit, so it's just the fruit, but they flash freeze it, flash heat it to kill off any bacteria, so it won't make your fermentation go wonky. There's certain fruit that's easier to do in the secondary fermentation versus the first. Things like stone fruit can be really tricky, especially like peaches, even cherries, because that rock in the middle and the foam, or the peach fuzz on the outside, all of that can carry bacteria and things like that. So if they are going to add fruit, what's the best way? Should they treat it? Do they boil it? Do they?
So I usually end up adding sulfites. If you're going to add just raw fruit to a batch, you want to make sure that you sulfite correctly. And then the dosage instructions should be on any sulfite package that you get. Generally, I think it's a quarter teaspoon per 5 gallons, very small amount. But yeah, make sure you sulfite. Don't overdo it though.
Then it'll taste delightful.
You get sulfur.
Is it true that mead has less sulfites than wine?
Yes, generally speaking, it is because we don't sulfite at every corner. With grape wine, you would generally sulfite when you're crushing, every time you transfer, when you're barrel aging, you're adding sulfites. And the reason for this is sulfites also preserve the color of your wine and any fruits that you might add to your mead too. But during their whole process, they're trying to keep the wine red instead of brown. So they need to add lots of sulfites.
Brown means it oxidized a little bit and probably fermented, which usually happens in barrels if you don't sulfite it before you put in either your wine or your mead. Um, Last question we get asked is, what's the easiest way to barrel age if you don't? So you might be able to see out of the corner there, we have 59-gallon barrels, all sorts of barrels. We have spirit barrels, wine barrels. If you don't want to do 59 gallons at a time, what's the best way to do oak aging?
So best way for oak aging, in my opinion, is getting like an oak stave or oak chips. Try not to do like an oak powder or anything because you're never going to get that out, and you're going to want to remove the oak at some point because you can over oak. So monitor carefully when you oak. just about every like 3-4 days to see how it's going. It can take up to a week or two if you're using chips, a couple of months if you're using staves.
So more surface area, it goes faster. So the barrels actually take longer. So we age everything in our barrels from at least 9 months all the way up to, we've done 18 months before, 20 months, just depends on when we feel like it's absorbed enough of that oak flavor. But that's all the questions that are top of mind. But if you have any other questions, let us know. We're happy to answer them. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.